Hello and welcome back. We are going to get into a bunch of great expressions about relationships and sex and biological things having to do with all of this in this Fluency Corner lesson. Now I'm going to be talking about a couple of things here. One of those is the social expressions, and then we'll also have more biological words as well. But one common theme for both of these things is the euphemism. And this is something, if you've not heard of this before, a euphemism is just a way of saying something that if you said it directly, like sex, like if I say that to some people, whoa, people would, they would blush, like their cheeks would get rosy. You wouldn't, say that maybe while you're out, just, after a meal with your family or something like that. So we use a euphemism where we're talking about that. So a euphemism for sex could be, let's see, there are lots of them, like a very bad euphemism, like one that's like, it's kind of funny, like hide the sausage. Now it's funny, like now I'm going to blush over here, but this is a kind of a crude, like a not very subtle, idea, but a euphemism for something. Again, we're trying to take something that might sound impolite or be blunt. And again, blunt meaning like we say something and people are maybe a little bit offended by that. So we think of a better way, a euphemism by which to explain that thing. So I'll cover a lot more of those. I just wanted to give you an example because when we talk about not only the different social phrases that we're using or phrases that are describing kind of the social interactions between people, but also the biological processes that people have. So the biological things that go on with your body. An interesting way to think about this, like a doctor would use more of these blunt terms, like he would talk about, well, we'll kind of talk about it more when I get to that. But the terms that a doctor would use, most people would use a euphemism for those things in regular casual conversations. So if you can learn those things, and I'll help you learn a lot of them in this video, then you're going to become a much more confident speaker. You also understand a lot more as well. So let's get into it. We'll begin with a lot of the social expressions and then we'll move on to the biological ones to end the video. First, we've got a lot of different expressions that can describe touching someone. And again, this is the interesting thing about the language, where you begin with, it's the same idea about a tree, where we have one idea, touch, where you're connecting skin to skin, or maybe you're touching someone even on their shirt or their dress or something like that. This is the basic term here, to touch someone. But then we can move into a lot more different meanings or more subtle or more specific things, depending on what kind of idea we want to express. So the first one here we'll just cover because it's one of the first that appears in the conversation is to grope someone, to grope. Now, grope usually has an idea of touching someone, but not in a very gentle way, not in a very confident way either. And this is a problem. So you'll hear us talking about this in the conversation, where even in Japan now, so a lot of people, especially in very busy cities like Tokyo, people will have, or there will be separate trains just for women so that they're not groped, men are trying to reach out and touch these women while they're on the train. So it was such a problem that they needed to have their own train. Not all women ride on this, and it's not all times of the day, I believe. But particularly busy times when you have lots of people really crammed into the train, you have to be careful because, you could get touched by someone else. It might be accidental, or you're really getting groped where someone's really grabbing you, something like that. So it could be grabbing your leg or some other more sexual body part or something like that. But grope is the word that we use for that. Even not in a sexual situation where you're talking about groping around in the dark for something. I'm not expressing myself. I'm not expressing myself well. You can see even right now, I can't really speak. I'm groping for the right word to say. So it means I'm not doing it in a skillful way, a way that's impressive to people. I'm doing it in I'm fumbling around with my language. I'm groping for something to say. So all these different ideas come from this. And again, this idea of touching something, but if we're doing it in kind of a bad way, a negative way, something that's maybe offensive to someone else. So if I'm groping a woman, she probably doesn't want me to be doing that. I'm not touching her gently. So if I want to touch her gently, maybe we would call that a caress. So if I'm caressing someone or I'm massaging something, these are different ways of touching. Again, it's that same idea, but you're getting more specific for that kind of thing about the language. So what's the feeling of it? What's the pressure of the touch? Is the other person happy about that or not happy about that in the case of groping? So in the case of groping, typically not. Now, one more thing here, just this same kind of idea about touching someone. Maybe you accidentally touch something or touch someone. You don't mean to do it. Like I turn around and maybe with my elbow, I hit, some woman in the chest area or something. So I graze someone. So this just means to touch someone just kind of lightly like this. I'm not groping, not, oh my God, groping someone like this. Just gently touching, gently grazing, something like that. And again, this idea of touching, just like groping for words, means you're not doing it in a skillful way. When you graze something, like if I shoot a bullet and it grazes the person, just means like the bullet, just went kind of, it went like right by me. It kind of barely touched me, but didn't hit me directly. So that's to graze something or someone. Next, we've got a couple of words and expressions having to do with making a connection for the first time. Now, this is typically when you're talking about a social situation, like a classic example is just going out to a bar. Although, as the young ladies were explaining to me, this is not something that happens as much now because a lot of people are using online dating tools and people are almost forgetting how to go out and, walk up to a man or a woman and approach somebody. But in these examples, we're talking about hitting on someone. To hit on someone, this is a really great phrasal verb, very common, and this is used for talking about beginning a conversation with someone, usually because you like the person. Even if you don't know anything about them, you find them physically attractive in some way. So you're going to approach that person. So you're talking about going on an approach or approaching someone to hit on that person. Now, you can hit on someone. You also hear chat someone up. This is a little bit more of a British English expression, but you will hear that, like I was chatting up some girl at a bar, but typically like hitting on is a more common American English, the United States expression. That you'll hear. Also, I hear from some people sometimes about my use of the word America. Now, when I say America, I know there are many countries, we have North America and South America, but American, like people who live in the United States, will often just shorten the name United States of America to America because it's the only country with the name of America actually in it. So many countries are in North America and South America, but the United States just uses this, and that's just why people typically call it America. So it's not meant to be offensive to anybody from a particular country. It's just really what we say, and this is why it comes out of my mouth naturally. When you're learning a language in this way, again, it's best to think about it like a scientist, to not be worried about having to express it in a certain way, or that like, okay, Mexico is also in Central America, so we're Americans too. Like, yes, I understand lots of people are in the continents of continents of North America and South America. Many countries are within these two continents as well, but casually and conversationally, people in the United States just refer to themselves as Americans because United States of America is what we have in the name. Now, getting back to what I was talking about, so you get on to the approach. So you're approaching someone, and this is where flirting begins. And again, we have a T in there, flirting, but it becomes more of a D sound, flirting with someone. So to flirt with someone means I say something, I'm maybe teasing someone a little bit, or I say, oh, that's a really nice jacket or something. I'm just using a way to, what we call in English, to break the ice. So to maybe, the first time you're making a connection with someone, you have to break that barrier there. There's maybe trust that you have to think about, and you have to warm up that relationship. So these are all, physical ideas we talk about, but there's a barrier there because people are naturally a little bit wary about meeting new people. So you have to, approach someone and be confident. And there are actually a lot of things that are quite difficult to do, especially for young men. I remember they were difficult for me. I don't really do them anymore now because I'm married, but it was fun to talk about these different things. So when you're flirting with someone, we also talk about, which person does the approach. So like if a woman looks at a man in a bar and then it's his job then to walk over, or does the woman walk over and initiate the conversation? And we talk about this as making the first move. So who makes the first move in a situation like that? Does a man approach and then make the first move to try to talk to the woman, to approach, to flirt with her, to initiate that, or does the woman? Next, in the conversation, you'll also hear us talking about gender roles, traditional gender roles. And so this is things where we're talking about what's traditionally masculine or what's traditionally feminine. And I mentioned in the phrase builder lesson talking about like the kind of different, what's the way to best describe it? So in the phrase builder lesson, I was talking about like liberal and conservative, and these are kind of the same ideas about like masculine and feminine, where there are traditional ways of thinking about it, and it's really just traditional because it's the way it's been done for a long time. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's better or one is good or one is worse than the other, but again, it's how people think about those, and then we all kind of have these rules for our lives that we live by. And so if it's a traditional one, maybe you are more traditional or more conservative. And then if you're more feminine, or not feminine, but if you're more liberal, maybe you have kind of new or more modern ideas about how men and women should treat each other. So I was talking to the young women in the conversation just because it was an interesting thing to hear their perspective. Now, I didn't have a young man from America or some other place with me to kind of talk with them also, because I don't really know much about how the culture is changing for young people who are dating in the United States now, or even other countries like the United Kingdom or Australia or Canada. But I get the impression just from news and with a lot of people talking more about the equality of men and women and talking about women's rights and making sure men and women are equal, it's making it a bit more different or difficult for people to express kind of different gender roles if you have those kind of values. So again, it's not about if it's correct or not to look at like, should a woman traditionally do this or should a man traditionally do that? But in the social climate now, it's changing to try to bring more equality into the situation, but it's also bringing a bit more confusion from what I hear. Next, we've got nightlife. Now, nightlife can be talking, I think in the conversation, it was used more talking about like romantic kind of things, like relationships and the kinds of activities that happen at night. You see, I'm speaking in euphemisms right here, so I'm not saying sex or something like that. But you can also talk about nightlife as the general, like going out in the evening and parties and things like that younger people do when they're going out and being social and, connecting with one another. So you can talk about what's the nightlife like in a city, and it's really just talking about more like not sex specifically. It's just more talking about, can you go to the theater, or are there good restaurants open, that kind of thing, the nightlife. Next, a really great expression. This is another phrasal verb, two of them actually. This is to turn on and turn off. Now, casually and conversationally, and you'll even hear me give a lesson about phrasal verbs in the conversation to the young women, but I was talking about the idea of where phrasal verbs come from, and it's really interesting that we have, like an old television set where you turn it on or turn it off, and this is where we get that idea of turning something in order to activate a switch, to add power to something, even though now we push a button or slide a dial or something like that. But sexually, when we're talking about being physically excited and we're in the mood, again, this is a euphemism here, I'm in the mood for, sex or something like that, but you can say, honey, I'm in the mood tonight, and then my wife says, I'm not in the mood, and I say, oh no, like that kind of thing. We're talking in euphemisms. We know what we're talking about, but again, this is more about expressing that in a way that's, a bit more casual and conversational. So if you feel maybe you can use those expressions if you walk up to a woman at a bar and you say, hey, like, we should have sex. Now, she might think that's funny, but she probably won't. It's just getting to know that kind of person. But again, that's why we speak in euphemisms. But this idea of being turned on or turned off, or you can talk about the phrasal nouns, so not the phrasal verb, but the phrasal noun of saying that something is a turn on or a turn off. So, like if my wife like wears, some very sexy outfit or something like that, like, yeah, that's a turn on for me. Or if she's just wearing some old clothes and, just like sick or something or whatever. I mean, it's a bad example, but that's a turn off kind of thing. So it's how you feel about a person doing something. If they're exciting you in a sexual way, this is known as a turn on, or they are turning you on like an oven, like something like that. Or the opposite would be a turn off. Next, very quickly, a prude. A prude. Now, prude is just a term used for, like, typically a conservative woman, especially in the modern day climate of dating where people are often having like a one-night stand, or they're connecting. A one-night stand just means having sex, like typically on the first meeting, the first night, and maybe you never have any kind of relationship or anything like that ever again with the same person. So that's a one-night stand. But when you look at that, like if you are the kind of person who does that sort of thing, and maybe you're talking with someone who does not, maybe you will look at that person and say, well, that person's kind of a prude. Like they should be able to have fun and enjoy themselves. Maybe they should, have sex with people more freely or whatever. Again, it doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with that for the purposes of this lesson. It's just more so you understand the vocabulary. Next, to have game. To have game. Now, here again, it's a euphemism. We're talking about game as in the game of men and women or relationships in general, whatever that relationship is. But we think about it like a game. There are different rules to it. What socially you should do? Is this allowed or is that not allowed? But these are the kind of the games that people play, and men and women, we will talk about, like, don't play games with me, or I don't want someone who plays games. So this kind of expression of a game, we're talking about just the rules and the different rituals that we have when we go out on dates. So people will argue, can you sleep with someone on the second date? Should you kiss someone on the first date or not? Is that too fast or too slow or whatever? So people talk about these different rules and what's okay to do. And then they change over time, just like the language. So now the rules are becoming a bit more liberal, and they used to be more conservative years ago. Anyway, so that idea of game, there's also the idea of having game, and this is typically used more for men approaching women and talking to women, because as I'll talk more about in this video a little bit later, the idea of evolutionary psychology is looking at the biology of men and women and the differences that we have physically, and thinking about how that changes our mental strategy for finding a different person to date, or how we do the game of dating, that kind of thing. So not just dating as well, but producing children and the other things that we have to do. But the idea of having game, or when you hear about wow, that guy over there has great game, it's just talking about he's very good at talking to women and getting dates or other things like that. Next, some more great phrasal verbs: to be called out and to be shot down. To be called out for something, when you're called out, it means you're being noticed by other people, usually in a negative way, because maybe you said something silly or you got, in trouble for doing something. So if I'm cheating on a test in the classroom with the student next to me, and the teacher looks at me and said, "Are you cheating over there?" She is calling me out. So she is, again, signaling that I did something wrong and making it known to everybody else. And then this is in a way, it's ostracizing me. So she says, you have to go sit in the other classroom and take the test because you're cheating. So again, that's, as I talked about in the phrase builder lesson, ostracizing someone. So the other phrasal verb here is to get shot down. If you think about a plane that's flying somewhere, especially in a war, you've got those little planes that are operated by one man and one person in the plane, or two people, and it gets shot out of the sky. So we talk about that like a man walking up to a woman, approaching her, and maybe he says, "Oh, hello, how are you?" And he tries to say something and the woman is clearly not interested. We say that the man has been shot down. And this is why it's often difficult, because even if maybe social ideas about men and women talking to each other have changed, still we have, a majority of people, a lot of people it's still men trying to walk up to approach women, and women often expecting men to do the approach. But what happens there is that the man is the one that he is taking the risk, because he is approaching the woman, and either she accepts him or rejects him or not. And this is why it's good to have some kind of sense about the person before you approach them. If the woman is looking at you many times, usually that's a good indicator of interest, that she's, happy to have you come over and speak with her. Next, we've got sexual harassment. That's another thing that came up. It's also a very common thing in just everyday conversations as well, especially if you're working at a company, a larger company, but sexual harassment is now more of a thing. I remember reading an interesting, I forget what online website or something like that, but it was talking about psychology, and it was talking about men and women working at the workplace, because before it used to be more segregated. Women would have maybe their particular place at the office and men would have their particular place. But when you start mixing them together, what this article was saying is that women wanted to be treated equally. So they were saying, you shouldn't be sexually harassing us, saying like sexual things to us at work. But the interesting thing that this article was saying is that men would do that to each other. So if you have many years ago, it's only men working in this area and they're saying sexual things to each other and they're joking around and that's just kind of what they do. And there's some teasing, and this is, just part of being human for most people. There's like different levels of people. You have a boss and other people that work for him and her or whatever. And so this is kind of a general thing. And so what this psychology report, it was just documenting how women were being treated equal by being kind of like harassed in the same way that men are harassed in the workplace. So it was a really interesting article. I don't remember where I saw it. I would recommend it though if you can find something like that. But again, sexual harassment, it can mean anything from looking at someone, like if I'm standing in an elevator and I look at a woman in like a sexually suggestive way. So I'm like looking up and down like, oh, like you look really nice. Or I say something to her. But again, we have this also kind of traditional cultural idea. And this is just another funny example of something I saw. It was I think it might have been, it was some comedy show, I think, but they were explaining what sexual harassment was. And they were saying sexual harassment is when an unattractive man tries to approach a woman. So when a good-looking guy approaches a woman and says, "Hey, like you look good today," it's not sexual harassment. But when an unattractive guy to that woman approaches that woman and she's not interested, then that becomes sexual harassment. Now, this is kind of joking, but it's funny because it goes into like a kind of more broader idea about how men and women deal with each other in the workplace or other things like that. But in general, it just means you're doing something negative that the other person doesn't really like. There can be sexual harassment both ways, like maybe women are harassing men and men are harassing women. But you hear a lot more about that as men harassing women. Next, I also mentioned, it was mentioned, courtship, and courtship is just another one of those kind of, it's like a classier way of describing dating, where you have, a man and a woman, they have certain roles that they have, even if it's not, like a man has to do this and a woman does that. But in general, just like every other species on the planet, like two birds are coming together, the male bird does this thing and the female bird does this thing, and they have a courtship ritual or something, and it's very complicated with humans, and it's different with even in different cultures or different neighborhoods within the same country. But again, these are just interesting things you notice. But courtship is just talking about the process of meeting and dating and building a relationship so that maybe you get married and have a family, that kind of thing. Next, I also mentioned MGTOW, so MGTOW. This is men going their own way. This is actually something I don't know very much about. Again, I'm learning, things like this because I'm not in the dating world anymore. But when you hear something like this, there's we call this a backlash, where it just means if men are perceiving themselves as like they're not able to communicate with women, or their opportunities are restricted, or other things like that. Like, you hear like younger people are delaying marriage longer and longer, and we talk about this as well in the conversation. Whether that's a good idea, I don't know. It's just something that I wanted to discuss because I figured you might be interested in that. But this idea of men going their own way is men saying, well, like the laws are designed to benefit women. So if we get married, then like the woman can, it's just like a lot of the laws are there for women to get custody, so to get control of the children if there's a divorce, other things like that. Again, I don't know specifically about like the rules or whatever, or what their particular principles are, but it's just an interesting thing that there is such a group of people like men going their own way, meaning they don't want to have relationships with women because it's, too much trouble or something like that. Next, kind of the opposite of someone who is a MGTOW, this is the alpha male. Now, this is going back to that evolutionary psychology idea, or evolutionary psychology with evolutionary biology, of where you have kind of a group of different people, just like you have in a company. You have a boss and then some people under that boss and then more people under that. So all humans are organized into these kinds of groups. So even within a family, even if like the mother and father are basically equal, usually there's one that's a little bit more dominant than the other. And even within the kids, like the older children are a little bit more dominant than the younger children, that kind of thing. So it doesn't always have to work that way. But these are interesting things that happen. And so because of that, like you kind of naturally create different things that could become things like sexual harassment, or even just the ways that we relate to the ways that we relate to each other, in relationships. And so this means like you have power relationships, like a boss. Like this was another thing recently, like the Me Too movement. So this is where a lot of actresses and like famous, even some men were saying that like powerful people in Hollywood were, sexually harassing other people like that. And again, it's kind of just not saying it's a good thing, but obviously it's something that happens because people are naturally kind of in groups like this. But also we get these same ideas of, because we have these groups, we have the alpha male, or the idea of the alpha male, because typically, like often in groups of animals like us, you will have maybe the dominant male who will, get access to all the women, all like the females in his area. And so all the other males are trying to become the alpha. So the alpha like that, it's a similar idea, for people as well. So you might have a group of men and then there's like the alpha, and he might not be the biggest or the strongest, but maybe the most confident or the wealthiest or just the highest status of those groups or that group of men or women. Next, some other great euphemisms, some other great words that describe just casual relationships. Typically, when you're getting into a relationship, you might at the very beginning just to weed out, and this is a great phrasal verb, to weed out, like you're pulling weeds out of a garden. This means to remove things that maybe you don't want, that you don't care about. So to weed out the people or things that are not interesting to you. So you might want a casual relationship. This is also described as friends with benefits. So maybe if someone is just a friend of yours, you have no sexual relationship with that person, but a friend with benefits, those benefits are maybe sex or other things that are related to that. So you're looking for a friend with benefits, and people will say, well, I'm just looking for a casual relationship right now. It means I don't want a long-term commitment, a long-term relationship. Next, I mentioned this a little bit in the conversation itself, but I thought I would talk about it here. And this is that, again, evolutionary psychology. So the way we think coming from the different kind of ways that we are physically as men and women. And so you might have women, again, like women have to be choosy, as I mentioned before in the phrase builder video, because they have a limited supply and also a limited amount of time of being able to produce children. So a man, conceivably, like it's possible to make 1 million different babies. It's like very possible for a man to do that, especially with science. You could go to a lab and, give your sperm or whatever and have lots of kids all over the world. But a woman can only, care for one baby or maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, at a time. And then you're still raising that child maybe for 2 or 3 years or something. So you have a limited supply and a limited time. But men, again, like we don't have to do that. So this is where the different reproductive strategies come from. And so that's why a woman, they have to be very selective about the kind of man they're looking for, but maybe men, like, we don't have to care as much, like, for just like a fun evening or something. If you're looking for a friend with benefits, you don't really care so much about maybe the person long term, and you're not thinking about it in an evolutionary way. Most people don't think about it like that anyway, but it's just a natural way we think. Next, Mr. Right. Mr. Right. Now, we often don't hear about Mrs. Right, but it's a word or expression that you could use. But Mr. Right is talking about the man that's right for me as a woman. So I'm out looking for Mr. Right. Maybe I go out on dates with a couple of different men, and then I find one that I really like, and that's Mr. Right. That's the good man for me. So the one that maybe he's funny and does other things, and he's the way I want him to look or something like that, Mr. Right. So women will often be waiting for Mr. Right, and maybe until he arrives, they date other people. Next, you've got a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad, which is becoming increasingly common. I am at home. I'm not a stay-at-home dad because my wife is at home as well. But this just means to be at home taking care of the children. Next, you also hear to settle down, and the opposite is to see what's out there. So when you're talking about settling down, this is another great phrasal verb, a way of talking about getting married. So we say, well, it's time for me to settle down. I'm, 40 years old. I have a good job, and I'm looking for now a wife, and I want to have kids and that kind of thing. So it's time for me to settle down. Or I'm, seeing what my options are, or I'm, still playing the field. These are, again, euphemisms where you're talking about still going out and, trying to meet people and date people and see what your options are. Keep your options open. Next, to seal the deal. To seal the deal. This is another euphemism where you're talking about having sex or some kind of connection where maybe you kissed someone or did something, but this is just coming from an idea of having a deal where maybe you have a contract with a different company or something, and you write down, you sign what that is, you put your seal on that. So to seal the deal, to make sure it's like a strong physical thing, but then we use that in a euphemistic way. So as a euphemism, talking about, well, like I went out with this girl last night and I come back and meet my friend for breakfast and he says, hey man, did you seal the deal last night? And I say, oh, well, I don't kiss and tell. I don't kiss and tell. That's another great phrase you can use when you want to like not tell other people what you did with someone, like maybe you went out on a date, but I don't kiss and tell. I don't kiss and tell. But seal the deal just means to physically connect or do something in that way. Next, you'll hear Carly talking about bonus points. And now points, talking about that for people, it's almost like we do keep a mental score of people when we're out dating, or even, if you're using a dating app and you're like, okay, this person gets 10 points because, they're an athlete and so they're very strong. Maybe they get another 10 points because they're a very smart person. They went to a good college, but they lose 20 points because they went to jail for doing something. So we talk about having different points for people in this way. And so Carly was saying, well, that guy gets bonus points because he, went out and took care of my family or does something like this. So you can kind of over time in a relationship, you can change your own point level for the other person. So if they're thinking about you in a certain way, if you do something nice for them, you kind of increase your point level for that. So Carly was saying bonus points for, my mom liking a guy. And finally, a few more things. We've got sleazy. So sleazy just meaning like a guy walks up and he says, hey, we should go back to my house and have sex right now. And you say, I don't want to do that. That doesn't sound like I'm not attracted to you. And that was a really horrible way to begin the conversation. That's just sleazy. And it's not something you like. Another expression is to hit it and quit it. Now listen carefully. I'll pronounce it so you can understand. Hit it and quit it. But we're pronouncing it quickly as hit it and quit it. Hit it and quit it. Hit it and quit it. It's almost like hit it and quit it. Hit it and quit it. Hit it and quit it. So hit it, again, this is a euphemism for having sex. Again, we've got lots of these. So to hit something and then to quit means like to leave. So it's like a one-night stand where a guy sleeps with a girl and then they don't do anything more for whatever reason. But he hit it and quit it. So it's a very kind of like sad thing, or, if both people were interested in that, that's great. But this is more how people can describe it in that way. Now, finally, we'll just cover some of the biological terms that were used in the conversation as well. Again, there'll be euphemisms for these kinds of things. The first one is a period. So period, this is kind of the everyday conversational term, the most commonly used expression for a woman's monthly menstrual cycle. So you have, like blood and things that come out. I don't need to go specifically into that, but anyway, to say you have your period, it's kind of like a period of time. So like it's my period, or you would say, or hear women say, I'm on my period right now. So that's a very common expression for that. There are other ways of describing it, but really this is the most common one. And so if you're using that, like if you were a woman and talking to your girlfriends and say, yeah, I'm not feeling very good right now, I'm on my period. You can also say, or you will hear people talking about, it's my time of the month. It's my time of the month, or it's her time of the month. And this just means, again, it's a euphemism for talking about a period. So women have a monthly cycle, where they're, like more likely to get pregnant, and then, they release a new egg. And again, I don't need to talk about the biology of it, but it's more about the expressions that people use. But very common ones are to be on your period, or to have your period, or having your time of the month. You'll also hear me talking about a gestation period, and this just refers to how long a baby is growing inside of a woman. So for humans, it's 9 months. For elephants, it's, 2 years or something like that. I don't remember how long it is, but it takes a long time, I think. But anyway, that's the gestation period. But even from this idea of the physical, like having a baby, being pregnant, the gestation period of that, we also talk about that, like the incubation period or the gestation period for like building a company or something like that. So maybe a company would have a division that's building some new product, and there's a gestation period where they're thinking about it, they're figuring out what that is, like they're incubating an idea, that same kind of thing. But it's just before something is released or born or given to the market, it's taking some time to grow internally. Next, we have contraceptive, a contraceptive. Now, a contraceptive is something that inhibits a woman becoming pregnant. So really for men, this could be just wearing a condom. Really, it's about all you can do, unless you're getting like an actual operation where, like you're getting a vasectomy. So you won't hear this. Like I don't go into detail about this in the conversation. I just thought maybe you would be interested in that. But that's the operation where you're getting your tubes tied, and so you actually can't produce any children anymore. Actually, some people maybe it heals or something, but typically when you get your tubes tied, then you're unable to have produce children anymore, but you can still have sex. So this is why people would do it, because men don't want to wear a condom, But like for women, there are lots of different things you can do, and I won't go into all these, but again, contraceptive is just talking about either you're blocking something physically or doing something like taking what women just call the pill. So women say, I'm on the pill. And this is just talking about, they're taking their pill every day. So it's stopping them from being able to get pregnant. Again, so they can, still not use a condom and enjoy sex. Next, you also hear us talking about young children, and then you can have adoptive children or foster children. Typically when like a regular family will go to like an orphanage, or they will just go to the hospital and adopt a baby from some other family. This is just having a child that is not yours, or you're of your blood, and so you're raising that child. Or you could have a foster child, and typically a foster child, it's like a child that isn't directly given to someone else at birth. So maybe they go into an orphanage. This is a house or a place where a lot of children who don't have parents are, so they're being raised in that. And so they would go through maybe a foster parent. So this is a similar thing of being adopted, but maybe it's not, you're like adopting that child, for life. So you might like kind of take care of that child for a while, and then put them on and, maybe do something else or give them to a different family, or they just get older and then they begin to take care of themselves. And finally, this isn't exactly a biological term, but I talked about a young buck. Now, this is a term for young men, and I was saying, well, I'm not a young buck anymore. Young men, this is like 18 to 29 or something like that. So younger men that are maybe not married yet, and they're going out and, still playing the field in the dating scene, other things like that, but they're not married and they're going out and just younger and doing things like this. But typically, older men are describing younger men in that way a young buck, just like a young deer compared to an older deer. Well, that's it for this lesson. I hope you have enjoyed going back and reviewing this. And again, do go back, listen to things again. Remember to go back and practice speaking with me. Watch how I speak. Remember, I don't have a script for these lessons, so I'm just thinking about what I want to say as I say it, but I'm still able to communicate fluently and automatically. And really, this is something you can develop. You can watch as I do this. Sometimes I'm even thinking about something I want to say, but then maybe I have to change my mind or I have to think about it in a different way. But you develop a better sense for this if you actually go back and repeat to try to speak with me or speak right after me, and this will help you get fluent faster. So go back and review this, and I'll see you in the masterclass conversation coming up next. Bye-bye. That's it for today's lesson. Let me know in the comments below which of these were new for you. If you want to see more of these, like the video, share it with others, and be sure to subscribe to the English Anyone YouTube channel. And if you want to speak English more like a native, click on the link in this video or on the link in the description below this video to download your free personalized fluency guide. See you in the next video.